A crisp autumn morning swept through Portland, Maine, carrying the unmistakable scent of dried leaves scattered across the cobblestone streets. Sarah Mitchell, a seasoned antique appraiser with over 15 years of experience uncovering hidden treasures, stepped through the doorway of a magnificent Victorian mansion on the historic Elm Street. The Whitmore estate sale had drawn collectors from every corner of New England, each one hoping to discover something remarkable among the family's century-old possessions. Sarah's trained eye, sharpened by countless hours examining artifacts from bygone eras, was immediately drawn to a small collection of photographs arranged on an ornate mahogany table with intricate hand-carved details. Among the sepia-toned portraits and faded images of family gatherings, one particular photograph seemed to call out to her, almost demanding her attention. What she found was a formal studio portrait dated 1914, depicting an elegant black family of four. The father stood tall and dignified, wearing an impeccably tailored dark suit that spoke of considerable wealth and social standing, a remarkable achievement for an African-American family during the Jim Crow era. His wife sat gracefully before him, dressed in a stunning white blouse with her hair styled in the fashionable Gibson girl manner of that period. 2 children completed the portrait, a young boy who appeared to be around 8 years old, and a little girl no older than 5, both dressed in their finest attire. The photograph bore the embossed seal of Hartwell Studios in Boston, one of the city's most prestigious and exclusive photography establishments. What made this even more remarkable was that Hartwell Studios was known to serve primarily wealthy white clientele, suggesting this black family had achieved an extraordinary level of prominence and respect in early 20th century Boston society. If you're fascinated by hidden historical mysteries and discoveries that completely change what we thought we knew about the past, smash that like button right now and subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell too, because what you're about to learn in the next few minutes will absolutely blow your mind. Sarah lifted the silver frame from the table, bringing the image closer to examine every detail with meticulous care. The composition followed the standard conventions of portrait photography from that era, the patriarch positioned, standing behind his seated wife, with the children arranged formally beside their parents. Every element appeared precisely calculated, exactly as was customary for photographic records of that time period. Yet something about the mother's posture struck Sarah as deeply unusual, almost unsettling in a way she couldn't immediately explain. While the rest of the family directed their gazes straight into the camera lens, maintaining the reserved and solemn expressions expected during formal sittings of that period, the woman's left hand displayed a peculiar positioning. Her fingers curved inward in an unnatural way, as though deliberately concealing something from view. "Quite a fascinating piece you found there, wouldn't you say?" came an elderly voice from behind. An older woman approached and introduced herself as Margaret Whitmore, the great-granddaughter of the mansion's original owners. Her family had maintained the property for generations, accumulating various items and heirlooms along the way. "Do you happen to know anything about the people in this photograph?" Sarah inquired, her professional curiosity now fully awakened. Margaret shook her head slowly. She explained that this particular photograph had arrived along with several other inherited items over the decades. According to what little family knowledge existed, the portrait had belonged to a family named Patterson, one of the few prosperous black families in Boston during that period. Beyond that single piece of information, nothing else about their story had survived the passage of time. Sarah returned her attention to the image once more. That unusual positioning of the mother's hand continued to nag at her instincts, creating an almost magnetic pull that she simply couldn't ignore. Something told her there was far more to this photograph than met the eye. Back at her downtown Portland office, Sarah carefully positioned the antique photograph beneath her professional magnification equipment. Decades spent appraising historical items had taught her an invaluable lesson. The most extraordinary discoveries often hide within the smallest details, those minute elements that most people simply overlook or fail to recognize as significant. As she methodically adjusted the focus and lighting on her specialized equipment, the image began revealing its secrets with startling clarity. The father's mustache was perfectly waxed and groomed, following the masculine fashion standards of that era. The children's clothing appeared pristine, pressed and spotless without a single wrinkle or stain visible. Every aspect of the photograph demonstrated the meticulous care and attention to detail that characterized formal portrait sessions of the early 20th century. What struck Sarah most profoundly, however, was what this image represented historically. Here was a black family in 1914, a time when African Americans faced tremendous obstacles and systemic oppression throughout the United States, sitting for an expensive portrait at one of Boston's most exclusive studios. The Pattersons had clearly broken through barriers that seemed insurmountable for most people of color during that period, but it was the mother's hand that captured Sarah's complete and undivided attention. Between the woman's elegantly curved fingers, barely visible in the original unenhanced viewing, appeared the edge of something white. The object seemed to be paper, a small folded piece, carefully concealed yet not entirely hidden from the camera's lens. The deliberate way her fingers curved suggested she was holding it intentionally, perhaps hoping it would go unnoticed in the formal portrait while still preserving whatever it represented. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as the implications began forming in her mind. Throughout her 15-year career appraising historical artifacts, she had learned that people often concealed significant things in plain sight, particularly during times of social upheaval, personal crisis, or when facing circumstances beyond their control. The year 1914 held particular significance in American and world history. It marked the beginning of the Great War in Europe, a period when families across America confronted tremendous uncertainty and faced difficult decisions about their futures. For a black family with obvious wealth and status, the pressures and dangers of that era would have been multiplied exponentially. They lived in a society that often viewed their success with suspicion or outright hostility. Whatever Eleanor Patterson had hidden in her hand that day must have carried enormous importance. Sarah photographed the detail using her high-resolution camera and transferred the image to her computer for digital enhancement. The white object became slightly more distinct on her monitor, appearing to be folded paper of some kind, though its actual contents remained tantalizingly mysterious. Reaching for her phone, Sarah dialed the number of her longtime colleague, Dr. James Reed, a historian who specialized in early 20th century African American social history at the University of Southern Maine. His expertise in documenting the lives and struggles of black families during this period made him the perfect person to consult. "James, I've come across something that I think will genuinely interest you," she said, unable to contain the excitement building in her voice. "It's a family portrait from 1914 featuring a prosperous black family in Boston, but there's something the mother is hiding in her hand, something she clearly didn't want others to see, yet something she couldn't bear to let go of completely. Given the historical context and what black families faced during that period, this could be truly significant." "Send me those images immediately," James replied without hesitation, his own curiosity clearly piqued. 1914 was an absolutely pivotal year, especially for African American communities. Black families were dealing with everything from economic uncertainty to the threat of racial violence to the looming war overseas. Whatever this woman was concealing might tell us a remarkable story about survival and resistance during one of America's most challenging eras. Dr. James Reed examined the high-resolution images Sarah had transmitted to him with the careful eye of someone who had dedicated his entire career to uncovering hidden black history. His historian's mind immediately recognized the potential significance of the concealed object. Formal studio portraits in 1914 were meticulously choreographed affairs where every single element was carefully controlled and positioned. Absolutely nothing appeared by accident or coincidence. "The Hartwell Studios marking gives us our first genuine clue," James explained to Sarah during their meeting at the university's African American Studies Department. Theodore Hartwell operated one of Boston's most exclusive photography establishments from 1895 until 1925. What makes this particularly interesting is that Hartwell was known to be one of the few high-end photographers who would accept black clients, for an additional premium, of course. His client records, assuming they still exist somewhere, might help us identify this family and understand their place in Boston's black elite. James had spent the entire morning making calls to various historical societies and archives throughout the Boston area. His contacts at the Massachusetts Historical Society confirmed they had acquired Hartwell's complete business records back in 1967, including detailed appointment books, financial ledgers, and client correspondence files. "I'm driving to Boston first thing tomorrow morning," Sarah announced with determination. "This mystery isn't going to solve itself, and I have a feeling we're on the verge of uncovering something important." The following morning found Sarah seated in the climate-controlled archives of the Massachusetts Historical Society. The Hartwell Studios collection occupied 3 substantial archival boxes containing appointment ledgers, client correspondence, and even some original photographic glass plates carefully preserved over the decades. She began her search with the 1914 appointment book, methodically scanning through months of handwritten entries. The notation system Hartwell used was precise and detailed, recording not only appointments, but also payment amounts and special notes about each session. Under the date, March 15, 1914, Sarah discovered exactly what she had been searching for. Patterson family portrait, 2 p.m. Payment received, $18.75. Premium sitting, special accommodation. The entry included a residential address, 145 Beacon Street, Boston. Sarah's breath caught in her throat when she read that address. Beacon Street was one of the most prestigious addresses in all of Boston, home to wealthy industrialists, prominent merchants, and old money families. For a black family to reside there in 1914 spoke to an almost unimaginable level of success and social standing. The premium sitting notation suggested the Pattersons could afford Hartwell's most expensive services, while special accommodation likely referred to the additional arrangements made for photographing black clients at an establishment that primarily served white patrons. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she photographed the entry with her phone. The next step in her investigation would involve researching the Patterson family's history at that remarkable address. But already she sensed she was on the verge of uncovering something truly extraordinary. A story of black achievement, hidden secrets, and perhaps tragedy that had remained buried for over a century. A librarian approached her research table with a curious expression. "Finding what you're searching for?" "I believe so," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now I need to discover who the Pattersons truly were, how a black family achieved such prominence during such a difficult era, and what a mother felt compelled to hide in her hand during what should have been a joyful celebration of her family's success." The weight of the mystery pressed upon her shoulders as she prepared to delve deeper into the Patterson family history, a story that promised to reveal both triumph and tragedy from one of America's most turbulent periods. The Boston Public Library's genealogy department became Sarah's next destination in her quest for answers. Armed with the address from Hartwell's appointment records, she began the painstaking process of piecing together the Patterson family story through city directories, census records, newspaper archives, and other historical documents that had survived the passage of more than a century. The 1910 federal census revealed the family's composition in remarkable detail. Thomas Patterson, age 42, was listed as a textile merchant, an impressive occupation for any man during that era, but especially significant for an African American. His wife, Eleanor, age 36, was recorded as keeping the household. Their son, William, had just turned 4 years old at the time of that census, while their daughter, Catherine, was listed as only 1 year old. The census also documented that the family employed 2 domestic servants, a clear indication of substantial wealth during Boston's booming textile industry period. Further research revealed that Thomas Patterson owned and operated Patterson and Associates, a remarkably successful textile importing business with connections to mills and manufacturers throughout New England and beyond. The company specialized in fine fabrics sourced from European manufacturers, a trade that required extensive international contacts, sophisticated business acumen, and the ability to navigate complex import regulations. What made Thomas Patterson's achievement even more extraordinary was the historical context. In 1914, the vast majority of black Americans lived in the South under brutal Jim Crow segregation, working as sharecroppers or in other low-wage occupations. Those who had migrated north faced discrimination in housing, employment, and nearly every aspect of daily life. For Thomas Patterson to have built a successful international trading business and established his family on prestigious Beacon Street represented a triumph against almost impossible odds. Sarah discovered that the Pattersons were part of Boston's small but influential black elite, a community of educated, wealthy African Americans who had managed to carve out spaces of success despite the pervasive racism of their time. These families often knew each other, intermarried, and worked together to support their community while navigating the dangerous waters of early 20th century American society. But as Sarah delved deeper into the newspaper archives from 1914, she began uncovering troubling information that cast a shadow over the Patterson family's remarkable success story. The Boston Globe from February 1914 contained a small notice buried in the business section. Patterson and Associates faces difficulties amid changing European trade conditions. The article mentioned concerns about the company's import documentation and suggested federal authorities had begun asking questions. Far more alarming was an item Sarah discovered in the Boston Herald dated March 10, 1914, precisely 5 days before the family sat for their portrait at Hartwell Studios. The headline read, "Local textile merchant Thomas Patterson questioned by federal investigators regarding suspected irregularities in import documentation." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as the pieces began falling into place. The Patterson family had commissioned their expensive portrait at Boston's most exclusive studio while Thomas was under active federal investigation. Given the racial dynamics of that era, Sarah understood immediately how precarious their situation must have been. A black man accused of federal crimes in 1914 faced not only legal jeopardy, but potentially his very life. This context gave entirely new meaning to whatever Eleanor Patterson had concealed in her hand that March afternoon. What had she hidden during what might have been their final family portrait as a prosperous Boston family? And why had she felt compelled to preserve it in such an unusual way? The reference librarian noticed Sarah's intense focus on the documents spread before her and approached the table. "Are you researching the Patterson textile case?" she asked in a quiet voice. Sarah looked up, genuinely surprised. "You're familiar with it?" "It's quite a fascinating case study, actually. One of the few involving a prominent black businessman during that period. Thomas Patterson was convicted of customs fraud in 1915. The family lost absolutely everything: their beautiful home, the business Thomas had built over decades, their hard-won social standing in Boston society." The librarian paused dramatically before continuing. "Eleanor Patterson. She disappeared shortly after the trial concluded. Some historical accounts suggest she fled to Canada with her children to escape the scandal and protect them from the aftermath. Others believe something far more tragic occurred. The truth is, no one really knows what happened to her. Sarah felt an almost electric sensation coursing through her body. Whatever Eleanor Patterson had concealed in her hand during that March 1914 portrait suddenly seemed far more significant than a simple family keepsake. It might hold the key to understanding what truly happened to this remarkable family, and perhaps even reveal a hidden truth that had remained buried for more than a century.